everyone. My name is Jennifer van Alstyne. I'm so excited that you've joined us. Today, I'm talking with Sammie Walker Herrera. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer. Today, I'm talking with Sammie Walker Herrera. We're going to be talking about LinkedIn for graduate students. I'm so excited that you've all joined us for this YouTube live session. Please comment in the chat if you're here. Let us know. Say hi. There's going to be plenty of time for questions. So like if you have something that is just like burning in your brain while you're listening to our discussion, please let us know in the chat. We want to answer your questions. We want to talk to you. All right, let us get started. Sorry, just getting my windows ready. Okay.
So was that part of it or no?
Yes, it was. It's just so everyone knows that we're now live. And so, Sammie, would you mind introducing yourselves just to get us started?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for bringing me on to the Social Academic. My name is Sammie Walker Herrera, as you mentioned. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And currently, I serve as a career coach at the University of Florida. Throughout my career, I started my education at Carnegie Mellon University studying Psychology and Hispanic Studies. And my career started right then. So I worked at the Career and Professional Development Center at CMU and worked a lot with students, either in their residence halls or those coming into the Career Center to work on resumes, cover letters, interviewing skills. And over time, I was actually able to work more and more with graduate students, with PhD students, international students. I taught a class called How to Get a Job. Best name ever for a class because it's very easy to enroll students.
It's like the class like everyone needs, right?
Exactly. They're like, I think I know what I'm getting from this class. So you don't even need to write a description for something like that. And so from that time, I realized, okay, I would love to work in career myself. And so I found higher education and student affairs as a great path. To that, one of the career counseling interns went to Slippery Rock and told me about that as a career path. So I decided, okay, at least I'm going to apply to Slippery Rock, and it's the program Slippery Rock, University of Pennsylvania, so just about an hour north of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah, so staying up north, and I was able to actually focus more on diversity and inclusion. I decided that it would be really important for me to build another expertise and be able to serve students from all backgrounds, whether that be in career or orientation, residence life, some of those areas. And so even my first full-time role in higher education was in diversity and inclusion. And now I've been working here at UF for about 9 months. I started remote actually. So I started right when the pandemic hit, which was hilarious. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were definitely feeling for me, but I think I was at least to be able to be adaptable. It was a good time to be learning on the job and providing a lot of support, especially with a significant volume of students, undergraduate and graduate, using our Career Center. Lastly, I want to make sure I highlight this for my mom, but I'm originally from McAllen, Texas, so deep South Texas as well, so representing the Valley.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I am coming here live from Lafayette, Louisiana, although we are moving to San Diego in January. I'm so excited that you've joined me for this conversation. For everyone who's just joined us, we are talking about LinkedIn for graduate students. This is going to be a great conversation. Hello, Julie, Ever Educating, Olga, and Larry. Thank you for joining us live. Please be sure to say hi in the chat and ask questions as we go along this conversation. So Sammie, you and I met through LinkedIn, right? We engaged because you connected with me and sent me a message, and we kept talking, and all of a sudden we had this conversation, and I was like, you have to join me for this YouTube live. I think we could have an awesome conversation about LinkedIn. And we met through LinkedIn. I mean, like we connected in Twitter and LinkedIn and through messages, but it started on social media. It started online.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I feel in general, folks have been a lot more open to that online networking than ever before, for sure. It's very easy to see if a person is real, right? If they have multiple social profiles, if they're producing a lot of content, if they're commenting on things and highlighting their expertise in that way. So I was just really impressed about what you did. Honestly, my partner, my boyfriend, is working on his own academic website. So I saw what you did and I was like, oh, okay, well, he's really busy writing papers and publishing. So I will check out some of these things so I can let him know about how he can be building his website, using some of his blogs, social media. And so I thought it'd be a good idea for you to be in my network, but more than just adding you, right? But seeing relationship building. How can we work together, collaborate? And sometimes these relationships, like this one, was like a snap. We were able to, within a few months, like build something out of it, right? Something tangible that's gonna be recorded. But sometimes these relationships are things that you maintain, that you connect with folks every few months or so, every year, just let them know where they are, and can be really fruitful and helpful a long time coming.
Yes. And we do remember people for a long time. I remember Ever Educating commenting on one of my YouTube videos like 6 months ago or a year ago, and me being like, oh, there's more people on YouTube who are talking about their teaching, who are talking about these awesome things. And we don't always know it unless someone reaches out and engages. And I think that's one of the ways LinkedIn can be super helpful in that process. And it's especially because you can tell someone's real pretty easily from a filled out profile. You can tell that they're a real person, they have a name, they have a photo. There's usually a little about section about them. So LinkedIn can be really beneficial in creating trust that will get someone to maybe reach out to you and start that conversation.
Yeah, and it's that positive brand building as well. I think a lot of times when we talk about branding, we talk about don't have things on your Facebook, delete most of your tweets, things like that. And there's also room on the internet to make sure you're building out your profiles or websites or portfolios, information, even for a lot of graduate students, GitHub, right? Or Org ID. And so making sure that you have some of those things out there so you are positively influencing what your brand is, what people know about you, and how they communicate with you. I know that's a cornerstone of what you do, is making sure that people can find you if they want to partner or if they want to know more about your work.
Yeah, that's definitely what my work at the Academic Designer is all about. I talk about managing your online presence in my blog, The Social Academic, and I really am trying to help people communicate about themselves online in a way that invites people to learn more about them. It's not like you have to be personal branding all the time. It's not necessarily it doesn't have to be like a business transaction. Communicating about yourself online is a good practice for communication. It says, hey, this is a little bit about me. You can read it if you want. You don't have to, it's like an invitation. And that's one of the things I like about LinkedIn profiles, especially. It's like an invitation to learn more about someone. And if you want to keep reading, if you want to get into like the work experience or the education, you can, but you don't have to. You could just read the bio if you wanted. So that's one of the things I like about LinkedIn. But there are a lot of misconceptions about LinkedIn, that it's just for business professionals, that it's not for students, that it's not for graduate students or academics. And I think I want to clear up some of that stuff. So you found a whole journey on LinkedIn over the past, 6 months, a year, and you've been discovering all sorts of ways people can use LinkedIn and really connect there. So what are some of those misconceptions that you found on LinkedIn that just aren't true?
Yeah, I think one of them that you mentioned was that feeling of like selling or boasting about yourself, right? One thing that's really important and completely true about recruiters, about industry, and even about graduate programs, if, for example, you're a master's student or a bachelor student looking into graduate programs, is folks want to work with other folks who have a good sense of self. And so having that profile that shows that you're introspective, that you reflected, and that you learned as you had experiences, not just had experiences to have them, is really important. And so that learning orientation is something that graduate students have an edge on, right? It's all your expertise is not only in your content area, but also in how do you learn and how do you even teach oftentimes or produce research. And so regarding graduate students, right now, there aren't a lot of folks who are graduate students or higher education professionals, for example, on LinkedIn. And I think that means that you might even have more of a competitive edge being there. I know one thing that a lot of folks don't ignore in their mailbox is .edu email addresses. Folks love helping students. When you send a message to folks mentioning they're alum or some other type of similarity, adding value to different conversations, sending emails and just outreaching, mentioning, hey, do you think you have 20 minutes next week so that we can, share a coffee or a digital virtual coffee for example, so I could get to know more of your career journey, your aspirations, and even suggestions you have for someone who's looking for an entry level or, for example, a managerial role. I think that's really crucial, really important, and a superpower that a lot of graduate students have, but don't always realize that they can use. I also think that, yes, LinkedIn does have more representation from certain industries, but that doesn't mean that you can't be known in your industry or even start adding more conversations and encouraging more folks to connect that way.
I completely agree. The beauty of LinkedIn too is that your profile isn't limited to people who are on LinkedIn. Your profile is actually going to show up in Google search results, which means that it's a pretty effective way of managing your online presence long term. If it's showing up at the top of the search results and people can see your updates in real time, something you have control over, well, that's pretty great. Please let me know in the chat if you have questions. We'd love to answer questions, so be sure to use the chat feature. Ever Educating says, yes, informational interviews are something I want to start doing in 2021. So Sammie, what are informational interviews, just for everyone who's listening?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that, because I work in career services, just throwing out different phrases. So informational interviews versus being interviewed, for example, is when you're in control of the interviewing seat and you're able to ask the questions that you would like to ask someone who is in a role that you're interested in, is at an organization that you want to know more about. Some of that research that you can do for an interview is mentioning that I talked to a couple of folks within the same team, and they mentioned this about your culture. You're able to ask a lot more direct questions. You're able to see whether that role is a good fit for you. And so using that as an opportunity really highlights how interviews can be really two-way street and also relationship building. There have definitely been times where I've hosted informational interviews with a professional, and over time, I've given back to that professional as well, or I knew resources that I could share because it was a conversation instead of an interrogation. So getting a better sense of, okay, now I'm looking at this person's LinkedIn profile, I have a sense for some of their experiences, so I'm going to tailor the questions I ask them so that I can make sure that I'm getting the in-depth knowledge that I think can help me with my own career, and also to know more about them so that we can build that network, we can connect in the future, be a work acquaintance, perhaps be a friend or be a future colleague.
Julie says that she just did an informational interview with you on Monday. And so I'm curious, can you use LinkedIn for informational interviews? How can that help? You said that it helps because you can see someone's profile, gives you a little more information about them, helps you tailor your questions for informational interviews. But can LinkedIn help you find informational interviews?
Yes, completely. So let's say you already know who you want to reach out to. So first off, when you send a connection, you can leave a personalized message. You only have about 300 characters or so. So just making sure you hit the greatest hits for this, right? This is who I am. This is what we have in common. I would love to connect with you. Do you think we can find a time, 20 or 30 minutes? Oftentimes saying specifically 20 or 30 minutes highlights that, it's kind of low commitment. And you can also even include, if this doesn't work for you, I can reach out with you later, or kind of that ability for that person, if they're really busy, to be able to respond and say in a little bit, right? Additionally, if you're not sure who to reach out to, but you heard from me, you've heard from Jennifer, you've heard from some of your faculty or some of your friends about doing informational interviewing, you can use the search feature in LinkedIn to look for folks who are project management professionals, right? Folks who are in your industry, folks who have certain skill sets. And there's even a LinkedIn alumni tool that you can use not only for your institutions that you've attended, but just institutions in general, where you can then really search for folks as well. Lastly, you can also search for folks and look to see who you're already connected to so they can give you introductions.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I have found a lot of informational interviews myself by asking people who I'm already connected to or who I know in real life. Just say, hey, do you know anyone in this field, or do you know anyone who's, doing this? And people are always happy to say yes. And if they don't know anyone, that's okay too. It's not their fault. So it's not like an obtrusive question to ask someone, do you know someone who I might talk to you about this thing? I love what you said, Sammie, about keeping it short and succinct when you reach out to someone, because there is that character limit, but also because people are busy, giving them the information they need, and also, the ability to maybe push it back a little bit or to understand exactly how much of their time it's going to take, is giving them the information they need to make a decision, whether that's something that they can do or not. So that's a great tip. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and another way to find folks is if you're reading articles, if you're reading books, folks love to hear that their work resonated with you. And they often don't hear it as much as the work does resonate, right? So being able to give some of those kudos as well, compliments, suggestions, advice, things like that can be really helpful. And again, kind of starting that relationship that's inherently both ways, not just a one way, I need help, give me a job, false relationship.
Definitely.
Mhm.
So there are some common misconceptions about LinkedIn, but those misconceptions, we've just kind of broken all of them, right? It's
Mhm.
okay if you're a student. It's great if you're a grad student. You can talk about yourself. You can talk about your education. You can talk about your expertise. So
Mhm.
LinkedIn is something that's great for graduate students, but let's talk about some more reasons why. We talked about informational interviews, so that's a
Mhm.
great plus, especially for graduate students who might be job searching. What about graduate students who are looking to connect with other graduate students in their field?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the same thing kind of with the informational interviews, maybe not explicitly saying like, I'd love to have an informational interview with you, right? But hey, I would love to connect, or I would love to learn more
Mm,
about what you're doing here. One thing that I often see students doing that I think is really great is if you attend a seminar, if you attend a conference, if you already hosted an informational interview, you can post on LinkedIn. There's a feed aspect. You can write posts, you can upload a video, you can put an image, for example, but text posts tend to be the easiest thing to do, but also the thing that reaches the most amount of people. So that's really nice as well. And so you can highlight the things that you've learned, use hashtags strategically so that you can outreach to other folks in your area. And so one cool thing about LinkedIn is it's the social media platform that has the most organic reach, which means that you don't need to pay for ads. And often LinkedIn will be pushing your posts to folks that don't know you yet.
that's great I actually didn't know that about LinkedIn, that it has the most organic reach. That means that it has the most potential for you to reach a lot of people you don't know. And so that's
Mhm.
something that you can do with Twitter, but it's a little bit less certain of who you're going to reach. On LinkedIn, they're going to show it to people who might be interested in what you're saying. So that's really cool. Now, a lot of people don't know that you can post on LinkedIn, or that people might read your posts on LinkedIn. What are some things that you've posted that you found where, people responded?
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks know LinkedIn as the place where once a year I post that I got a job, right? There's a picture of me in front of the institution.
Right.
Hey, I'm holding a beaker in front of this. It symbolizes something scientific. And so oftentimes folks see it as a place where, oh, okay, this is just where I highlight like a big news thing, like
Hmm.
other than also Facebook for my friends or my group me or WhatsApp or something
Right.
like that. But I'm seeing so many more folks highlighting like their stories, things that they've learned. Um, for example, I did have a post where I talked about a certification that I earned, and so thanking the folks who helped me move toward getting that certification and what that means for my career practice, right? So that's kind of one of those accomplishment posts. But even today, I posted about this YouTube Live, but not just about this YouTube Live. I talked about how we found each other, how we were able to make this happen, and then kind of my lesson with that was that oftentimes we can feel imposter syndrome if we only connect with folks who have the exact same expertise as us. And that's why I think it's really important to connect with graduate students, industry professionals, really anyone, so you get a better sense of, oh, wow, these are the things that I really learned, skills that I have that other people just don't have. Maybe my cohort mates might, but this is the way that I can really differentiate myself, especially if I'm looking to pivot to a new industry.
Connecting with new people on LinkedIn is so important anyways, because on LinkedIn, the way it works is that the more people that you're connected to, the more people you can reach, and the more people will see your posts. So if you're only connected to maybe 50 people, maybe that's the 50 people that you really want to be connected to, and that's great. But if you connect with more people, it actually gives other people the opportunity to see you in search results, to see you in their feed. And if you don't try to reach out and make some more connections beyond your personal network, it might actually impede you from being found by the potential employers or the potential collaborators who might want to work with you. So don't feel like you have to be as private on LinkedIn about connection requests as you might be on other social media platforms.
Mhm.
Even though it's like a business platform, it is actually something that's pretty open where you can reach out to people that you don't know. It's totally acceptable. And if people don't want to talk to you, they just won't respond. So that's okay too.
Yeah, I think another way to get your voice out there on LinkedIn that's kind of that's not known as well is oftentimes there's kind of that barrier. I don't know what to post. I don't know the language on LinkedIn, right? Or I see people use a lot of spaces, or sometimes people use emojis, sometimes people don't use emojis. You start figuring out your voice over time, especially as
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of checking feed and getting a sense of like what are the types of stories I can tell about my life. But one thing that can help you reach a larger audience potentially have more connections, and again, practice some of your posting on LinkedIn, is commenting on posts. That's actually a lot more reach in some ways. And so adding something of value, not just like amazing post, I love it, but something like that you've gained from that or a similar experience that you've had. There's quite a number of characters for comments. It actually has probably the same amount of characters as writing a full-on post. And so you can definitely connect with folks that way. And folks can then review your profile, they can add you. And I definitely recommend, especially if as you're building your network, to do those personalized invites, just so it's clear what exactly you feel like you connect with the other person.
Great. Now, can we take a look at your LinkedIn profile just to show everyone an example? Would that be okay?
Yeah, no, that's totally fine.
Awesome. Let me share my screen. Please let us know if you have questions in the chat box, especially if you have questions about profiles, since that's what we'll be looking at next. All right.
That's me. I had someone add me on LinkedIn because we had a conversation on email, and they're like, I think this is the right person. I'm like, I think there's only one person with my name.
All right. Here we go. So why don't you tell me about your profile? You have this great cover image. You have a very friendly profile shot. And then it says your full name. It has a pronunciation for your name, which I love. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if everyone here can hear it, but I can like repeat it or so if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, maybe it won't play. Apologies for everyone listening live. But
So,
there is a little pronunciation that you can click on next to her name.
Yeah, which is really helpful because a lot of people don't know how to pronounce my second last name. I think it's helpful for anyone, whether or not like you've had issues with folks pronouncing your name, or if you have a very easy to pronounce name, for example, because you can use that as a 10-second introduction. You can even say, hey, thank you so much for coming to my profile. I think for mine, I mimicked a voicemail inbox for people choosing 1 for English, 2 for Spanish. So I was able to pronounce my name correctly in Spanish, which is pretty fun. And so you can be really creative with that. But yeah, LinkedIn over the past few years has included a cover photo or a banner image. And so I mocked mine up on Canva. So Canva is a site that makes it really accessible for folks to make their own graphic designs. And they have a selection on Canva where you can choose LinkedIn banner. Unsplash.com is also a good place to find some beautiful and uncopyrighted photos or uncopywritten. And so you have your name. You can include, for example, your level of education there as well. And so underneath my name, you also see the headline. And so this is really crucial for visibility on LinkedIn. So for example, no matter where you're on LinkedIn, if you're commenting, if people are checking out your profile, they're always going to see your picture, your name, and your headline. And so you want to make sure it has keywords, it has things that you want to be known for. I see a lot of students have graduate student at Carnegie Mellon. Okay, and what do you focus on, and what do you want to do? Some of those things. And so you can add definitely a lot more detail to that to make it clear for folks what exactly you're about and how they can be interested in what you do, for sure.
Great. So be detailed in your headline and add the pronunciation thing in, because that will help a lot of people. Julie has a question. She says, is there a way to change if people get notified if you look at their profile? I feel creepy by looking at people's profile knowing that they're going to get notified.
Yeah, so LinkedIn settings are very diverse. There's a lot of different things I suggest for folks to turn on and turn off in their settings. And so, for example, if you'd like to connect with me afterward, or I can share like a YouTube video on some of those settings. But there is one setting that allows you to do like a LinkedIn stealth mode. So you can be looking at folks' profiles and it doesn't have a notification for them, or they don't see exactly that you were the person looking at their profile. The downside to that is you don't know who's looking at your profile. So it kind of erases 90 days worth of data of like who's looking at your profile. And so I think that's helpful. I think I had it private for a bit, but now that, I want to see who's looking at my profile or see who I can support, or for example, if students at University of Florida want to connect, things like that, it makes it a little bit easier. And so I keep it on.
I actually like to keep it on when I browse as well, because
Hmm.
when people from maybe my past or from high school will look at my
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile, it just reminds me that they exist, and I'm like, oh hey, I haven't thought about you in a while. Thanks for checking out my LinkedIn profile. Occasionally, it started conversation, so
Hmm.
there's not really a downside to someone seeing that you're checking out their LinkedIn profile. They probably just think that you're looking at their profile for an example. So you shouldn't feel like creepy all the time. If you're doing it maybe really late at night or something, then you might want to turn it off, because it does
Hmm.
potentially send a notification to their phone. So that's just something to keep in mind. Don't feel like you have to turn it off. It's okay if you want to leave it on. Like, it's not as creepy as it feels internally, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've definitely started so many conversations with folks that I haven't talked to in a while, because I was like, "Hey, I was checking out your profile and I noticed this," or "Hey, I saw you were on my profile. Like, what's going on? I hope you're keeping safe." And so it's a great way to be starting those conversations. And LinkedIn takes note if you're using the platform, if you're using messaging, and so then they share your posts with more folks in your feed and in your connections.
Yeah. All right. So, like, now I have your about section pulled up,
Mhm.
and it's quite long. Tell me, why did you choose to have this about section? It looks like it has some testimonials in it, and it has
Mhm.
your contact information, it has your pronouns, it has a lot of great information. Tell me about writing this about section.
Yeah. So one thing with about sections is that you want to do that introduction to folks. And with this, you get a really great sense to talk about how does your education, how does your experience, how does your skill set, how does even your volunteer, your hobbies help make you the person you are toward the opportunities you're looking for. So even if you're not looking for a job, what if you're looking for speaking opportunities, or you're trying to convince University of Florida students to set career planning appointments with you, right? Thinking about who's that audience that I'm selling to, if you have a business, or that I'm trying to engage and let them know what I'm about, is really helpful. And so for this one, I wanted to make sure that I talked about how I got into career services. That's actually one of the most popular questions that folks in higher education field, when they reach out to me, ask me, is how did you get into career services? So it kind of answers that question. For example, for folks, I've been brought in to give workshops for graduate students in higher education. And so I have a testimonial from one of the workshops I've done, so that folks can reach out to me if they would like me to speak. I even have speaker in my bio, and so, or in my headline, so it makes it easier for folks if they want to bring me in for something pro bono, volunteer, or even a paid opportunity. I've been paid for some types of speaking as well for student groups, which has been excellent. And so this lets me really tell the story about how I make sense about my professional experience. Yeah,
Apologies, I was having some issues with my microphone.
no problem. And I think people like to see that human side of you. I think it makes LinkedIn a lot more human, and it makes it easier also to say, hey, I was also a peer mentor in college, or hey, like you taught safe zone trainings for LGBTQ advocacy. I'd love to learn more about how I can also do that for my institution.
People connect for all sorts of reasons, and it's just, you never really know what is going to be that driving factor in someone wanting to reach out or someone feeling closer to you, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely been posts or things that I've done on LinkedIn that people after the fact told me influenced them. I remember I was connecting with a professional who recently moved to Pittsburgh, and I was listening to her audio because I wasn't sure how to pronounce her last name. And I said, "Oh, thank you so much for that. That was really helpful." And she was like, "Oh yeah, I saw your LinkedIn post about it, so then I updated it." You never know what kind of
That's
impact you
great.
have. Mm-hmm.
That's really great.
It's so funny.
Tell me about this featured post section. How did you decide what to include in this section?
Yeah, so featured post section, you can include posts that you've written on LinkedIn, images, videos, other types of media, slide decks, for example. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of posts that highlighted, the first one was a little bit more about like my personality and what I gained from my graduate program. One of my close friends took that picture of me holding all of these books that are in the bookshelf right there. The next one is the certification that I earned, so it gives more context to that as well. And I've had questions from folks. For example, when Julie and I did that informational interview, she was asking a little bit more about what certifications mean for career services professionals. So for example, that people know I can answer questions about that. The next
Great.
one is about my website, for example. And so it's a really great way to make sure that folks get a better sense of what are the things that you want them to know about you.
So it's really dynamic. You can include posts that you shared on LinkedIn. You can include links like an external website. That's great that graduate students should know that there's a lot of things that they could include in that kind of section. If you've been profiled by your school, maybe you want to include the article. If you have a great thread on Twitter where you shared information about your recent article or something, or your upcoming talk, that's something that you could share as well, because you can share links. So there's a lot of things that you can include in that featured section.
Exactly. Or even videos like testimonies or like examples of your speaking, for example.
What would you say is most important for this experience section for graduate students? They're oftentimes not sure what to include in this section.
Yeah, I think one myth about LinkedIn is that, oh, well, it's just an online resume. So let me just pop in the bullet points I have on my resume and then we're good. So I've seen so many different ways that folks have written their experience section. So honestly, it's really based on your personality. And also, as we mentioned, like looking at other profiles for examples is really important. So for example, because I'm a university professional, I find it really important to highlight what the context of the university I'm working at is, especially because I was working at a liberal arts college with 1,300 students, and now I'm working at a Research One top public serving 52,000 students. Highlighting that I have such a diverse experience, I can do that by using some of those bios from the offices, as well as highlighting some of the specific kind of resume bullets that I think are the most relevant for folks, and even media as well. So at the bottom, there's the Meet the Team, where you can review my staff photo and staff bio. And then the other one is a blog that I wrote for students in our college once we went into the virtual learning environment. And so
being able to include these extra media pieces is so great for graduate students who can share more information about their work, share more information about their experience or their research. Very, very dynamic.
Yeah, you can include photos as well. I was looking at the profile of a student that I was working with who's in horticulture and was literally had pictures of himself in the field. Like, that's amazing. That's awesome. So showing like your enthusiasm, your passion, and your focus in your work as well.
Great. All right, let's talk about the education section, because like you said, including more information will help more people connect with you. And you've included, student affairs, graduate associations, you included all your activities and societies, and you also included information to help people understand the specific program that you took and how it was going to benefit that kind of larger career goals, right? In here, there's a lot of information that various people can learn the information that they need, not just people who are maybe considering you for a career. This is something that's written for more than just hiring managers, and that's really the beauty of LinkedIn.
Yeah, and for example, like maybe this entry is like a love letter to Slippery Rock University, right? Highlight the things that I really valued doing, the ways I was able to get so involved in 2 years. And for example, as you mentioned, there's different audiences. What if there's someone who's looking at folks who've earned master's degrees at various student affairs and higher education programs and see this and get a larger snapshot of what they can gain from that based on what I've gained?
Right. And then the last thing that I really want to talk about is this skills section, because I feel like a lot of graduate students don't know what to put in skills. So what recommendations do you have for deciding what to include in your skills and endorsement section?
Yeah, so one thing that's really crucial about skills, and it's so funny too, because it's right at the bottom of your profile, it's really easy to forget, is that when professionals or recruiters are using a LinkedIn tool, like they're paying for LinkedIn Premium, they're searching for candidates on LinkedIn and trying to make sure they're using that service, is skills ranks as probably about the third most important thing on your LinkedIn profile. And so you want to make sure you have keywords related to your industry, related to your interpersonal skills, as well as your specific content knowledge. So you can have up to 50 skills on your profile, and these top 3 you can put right in the top 3. So folks can click on it if they know of your experience coaching, right? Or being a speaker, for example. You can go to other folks' profiles and endorse them. Oftentimes folks do the same back, and they'll endorse you for certain skills as well. And so that searchability is really crucial, adding those keywords to make it easier for folks to find you. Yeah, and then also highlighting kind of that snapshot of like, what are the main things I'm known for? So for example, I put 3 skills at the top that I don't have as many endorsements for, because it's more likely people will endorse you for some of those things. But I think for career counseling, I have like 38 or something like that. You can have like over 100 or so folks vouch for certain skills of yours.
I'm going to stop the screen sharing because it said that the stream's weak. It was like weak or something, probably because I was sharing too much stuff at once. But yeah, right. Ever Educating asks, what are your thoughts about the skills quizzes on LinkedIn, where more people see our profile if we take those quizzes?
Yeah, the skills quizzes are really interesting. And so I've not taken any of them. They're specifically regarding software, coding, some of those programming languages. I know they have one for Microsoft Word, and I actually took that one and failed it because they don't tell you failed it, but I'm allowing the world to know I failed it. They're very, very detailed about specific aspects. So I think they work really well for folks who are in Microsoft Office, like as a main function of their role, to be able to highlight some of those details. I think there are some ways that it probably boosts your searchability. For example, if you know Python or C++ or JavaScript or something like that, that it increases your searchability because you've given that kind of, you've given that assertion that you actually know it, instead of like, I asked 20 of my top friends to click the endorse button for me, kind of thing. But I don't think it's as necessary. And at least for me, who's more soft skills person than software or programming or some of those research skills, I don't find it as necessary for what I do.
And just for any programmers or software developers who are listening, you can include those keywords in other parts of your profile. So there's actually other better ways perhaps to highlight your experience in those sections. For instance, using those dynamic media links in the featured section or within a work experience section to better describe a project. I think that's going to be more appealing to hiring managers than maybe that particular LinkedIn skills quiz. They'll test you at some point during the interview anyway, if that's something that's necessary for the job. So don't feel like you need it. If it's on your resume, then it's probably something that they've just checked off in their minds.
I completely agree. Great advice.
All right. What are your thoughts about the volunteering section for extracurricular activities that has experience that link to your professional experience? Should that be included in the experience section or in the volunteering section?
That's a really great question. So I tend to put most of them in the volunteering section because, for example, some of them were while I was doing my graduate program or while I was an undergrad, for example. I volunteer with the ACPA, so the College Student Educators International is their tagline there. And so I don't include that as a specific experience for me because I'm currently full-time employed. I'm focusing more on some of the things that I'm doing. And so I think you can include some of that volunteer experience if it's in depth, if it's long-term, if it's multiple hours a week, to highlight that you've built that experience. And especially if you have like a gap in your experience, or if you're currently unemployed or you're looking to make sure that some of your most relevant experience is toward the top, I think you can definitely do that because it's so general, that experience section. And over time, you can edit your LinkedIn every day if you want to and put things in the volunteer section or the experience section based on how it's relevant for you.
Great. That's a great point. Things can change over time. It's totally okay to edit things as it makes more sense for you. If you're going out for a particular job, maybe you do want to highlight that in the experience section. One other part of that question that I want to touch on, what are your thoughts about the volunteering section? So the activities that you include in volunteering section don't have to directly connect with your current work experience or whatever your future career interests are. Again, like the education section, there are all sorts of things people can connect over, even if it's not the specific industry that you're going into. So for instance, my fiance had been job searching for a long time and he volunteers for a bird rehabilitation center. And he included that in his profile. And even though birds had nothing to do with this particular job, the interviewer also had a passion for birds. And that was something that they connected over. Even though it was a short volunteer experience, that was something that created a connection, even though it didn't have anything to do with the job. So don't limit yourself in terms of what you include. If it's something that you cared about, if it's something you're passionate about, especially, then that's something I would include in your volunteering section.
I completely agree. Additionally, when employers are looking at your resume specifically, they oftentimes tend to weight your volunteer experience equally to your work experience. So you can do the exact same thing with LinkedIn.
Great. Olga says, thank you so much for these tips. Could you share a bit more about how to find motivation to switch fields, for example, in or out of academia, or how to connect with people in different fields? So especially on LinkedIn, connecting with people for informational interviews is going to be a big part of that. What else? What if you're thinking, what if you're a graduate student, you're thinking about not doing what your current research is about after you finish? What if you're thinking about going into another career?
Yeah. I think one oftentimes untapped resource on LinkedIn is that you can follow people. So you don't have to just connect with someone and then send them the personalized invite and wait for them to add you. You can go to someone's profile. Either they'll have the follow button there instead of the connect button, or you can drop down and press more and then follow that person. And I highly suggest following career coaches. Right? If you don't want to connect with me, you can follow me, I suppose, right? You can follow career coaches that are coaches for the technology field, that are coaches for folks who they have not yet gotten to the interview stage, right? And want to get to that stage, right? So I think searching career coaches and following for that advice, for that motivation, when you comment on those posts, you mention that like you're a job seeker or you're looking to pivot. And then a lot of folks might comment back and highlight to you that they want to provide some support or they want to connect with you. One thing that's definitely, I think, really crucial on LinkedIn that LinkedIn is needs to change their UI about is if you comment on someone's post, it's really important to tag that person because then they'll get a notification about it. The number of times people comment on things that I've done makes me need to babysit the post because then I don't know if they've commented or if they are asking me a question or if they would like my feedback on something. And so especially when you're commenting, as we mentioned, you don't have to just be posting content all the time. Commenting counts. Tagging that person or tagging other people is really important so they get those notifications and it's a lot more clear that you're using the platform as well.
Great. Eric asks, what are some tips for reaching out to secondary connections?
Yeah, so oftentimes when you see a secondary connection, so for example, Jennifer and I are first connections because we've added each other on LinkedIn. But I'm probably a second connection with your fiance because we're not connected on LinkedIn, right? And so first off, you can often see you have at least 1 or 30 or 90 or 300 people in common, right? And so you can draw upon one of those folks to introduce you. If that can be helpful as well. You can also send a connection and say, hey, it looks like we both know this person, right? If you're okay with just doing that general outreach, I think is really helpful as well.
So I'm like, honestly, I'm the opposite of Sammie. Sammie likes sending personalized connection requests, and I think that that's great. For myself, I actually don't like receiving personalized connection requests because oftentimes there's not really a response that's required. Like when people send me connection requests that are personalized, they're usually either selling me something or they're just saying, hey, I'm sending you a personalized connection request. Here it is. So those are kind of like the two extremes that I get. But when I get a connection request that doesn't have any information, my first instinct is to go check out their profile. I want to see if there's someone I want to be connected with. And if their profile is filled out, if they have an about section, I can usually decide if that person's a really good connection for me or not just by hitting that connect request because they've invited me to check out their profile. So for myself, for second degree connections, you don't always have to come up with something to say to them. You could just send them a request and see if they might want to be connected to you too. If they do, you might send them a message at that time and start a conversation, but don't feel like you need to do it every single time. Like you don't have to send a personalized message every time, especially if you're thinking about exploring maybe a new industry and you don't maybe know very many people in that, then you're only going to be connecting with second degrees probably because you might not have a network in that field already. So that's something to consider as well. And the best tip I can give for that is that your profile has to be filled out. It has to be personable. It has to have information for people to understand you. Otherwise, they're not going to know why you might want to be a connection.
Yeah. I think also, regarding that motivation piece as well, sometimes that motivation piece is, oh, well, I have to climb this huge mountain. I need to think of these creative posts and I need to think about these engaging comments and I need to figure out my personalized invites. There's so many resources out there. So for example, your own university career centers, YouTube videos, templates online that you can use for those invitation connections and things like that. Definitely working smarter rather than harder in that sense can be really helpful as you're building your presence. And then you can start kind of customizing and testing some things out as well. I think that's really helpful to make sure that you're taking it kind of bite size. Additionally, with your profile, I think some folks feel, okay, all or nothing, that's all I've got. But maybe one day you just really optimize your headline. And one day you design your banner. And then another day you work on some parts of your experience section, or you scour the internet, or you think about what you have on your computer that you can include in your featured section or your media. So you can definitely take it step by step. I participated in a LinkedIn challenge from Marina Bajnikova, I believe. I can send information about that. That's #brand of a leader. And so every day for 30 days on the weekdays, there were simple tasks to be able to update different aspects of your LinkedIn profile. So if you kind of systematize it in that way, or you find a challenge that can help you get a better sense of, okay, by this time next month, I should have like a profile that has a lot more keywords, it's a lot more filled out, is a lot more friendly to folks who are reviewing my profile and trying to see if they want to be connected.
Honestly, that's how I approach writing. It's how I approach like social media profiles. That's how I approach websites. Everything can be updated and improved pretty much at all times. So anytime that I go into my LinkedIn profile and make any one tiny change, it's probably helping someone else understand it or me a little bit better. So it's something that can happen over time. Anything that you do to improve your profile is going to be a step in the right direction. That's great.
Yeah.
The other part of Eric's question, just before I forget, is what is the best way to reach out to recruiters for informational interviews, recruiters specifically?
Yeah, recruiters specifically. I think one thing that can be helpful is following the person, right? And then to get to know their voice, to see some of their posts as well. But definitely I would send a connection with that personalized invitation to say that you're interested in learning more about the organization, that you've been eyeing a specific application, or job description, or that you've already applied as well. That can be helpful, but you don't always have to connect just to the recruiters. I would definitely say, connecting with different folks who are working at that organization, not just finding one person, but trying to find 5, 6, 10 people. And so that if folks aren't as active on LinkedIn, or if it's really busy time, you might have 1 or 2 people who respond. Sometimes it has that piece of the numbers game with it.
When you're in like the nitty gritty of that job search too, sending those kind of personalized messages to someone can be a great boost up. It can actually get your resume seen sometimes. One tip that my fiance got from a career coach that he had worked with was that after you filled out an application, you sent it in, you can, connect with someone in that particular company, send them a quick message. Hey, who do I follow up with about my application? I'm super excited about this position, and I'm wondering if you know who the best person to contact is. Oftentimes they do know, and they're going to reach out to that person and say, hey, someone messaged me, they seem enthusiastic, just passing along their name. Or they're going to give you the right person, and you can send them a message and be like, hey, just following up on my application, I'm super excited about this position and wanted to introduce myself and say hi. It sparked conversations. It's definitely had people be sure to look at his resume based on just that simple message. So that's something to consider as well when reaching out to hiring managers. You can reach out to someone else in the company and just check in. They might have a little information that can help you.
Yes, and I do think that's a miracle question for sure, whether or not it is with a recruiter or for an informational interview, but asking folks, at the end of these conversations, is there anyone else that you recommend that I connect with or that I chat with? And even asking for that introduction makes it a lot more likely that you're going to turn that cold lead into a warm lead, into a connection that can be really mutually beneficial.
What is that? What is a cold lead versus a warm lead?
Yeah, so a cold lead would be like cold emailing, cold calling. So reaching out to someone that you don't have a previous relationship with, that doesn't have an introduction, that probably didn't expect your message, for example. And you can definitely still do that, right? But for that one, the numbers game is maybe you need to reach out to 50 people, right, to get a couple of responses. So that warm lead would be that you have an introduction, you have that referral, people are kind of expecting to hear from you as well, which can be pretty helpful. So either or have chances of success, but oftentimes it's a little bit easier if it's clear that you are connected to someone else, or you're connected to their industry, their organization in some way.
Great. Now, how can graduate students who are maybe just updating their profile, how can they start networking? Like, what's their first step?
Their first step, start networking. I think the first step, honestly, and I do not see a lot of people doing this, is networking isn't just about building a network, it's also about maintaining your network. So I think the first thing that folks should be doing is adding various folks to their LinkedIn, right? Or going back to their emails, going to the bottom of your text messages. I learned this from Dave Eng, who he leads the Student Affairs Job Hacker. I went to a networking session that he hosted, and he encouraged us all to go to the bottom of our text messages. And, given it's not like me texting Verizon or something like that, text the last people there and say, hey, we haven't talked in a little bit. I miss you. I hope that we can connect sometime soon. And so I think really kind of collecting who is in your network, who do you know, and giving those updates, mentioning, hey, I hope you're doing well. I know we're coming up to the holiday season. Maybe you can even get their address and send a postcard or something like that, and just getting on the phone or sending an email out to a larger group of folks saying, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm interested in, things like that. That inherently warms up your whole network, right? And if you ask some of those questions, like, is there any person that you recommend I chat with? Or have you heard of folks who are also doing project management or research and development or computational astrophysics, for example, right? It's easier to do that because over that time, there's been that gap in the relationship. They've met more people, they've built their network. So it makes it easier for you to build your network after you maintain.
Great. So reaching out to the people you know, maybe people you haven't talked to in a long time, that's a great first step for people. And it really helps create more warm leads. Again, more people who you can reach out to, network or informational interview with, who might be closer to expecting to hearing from you because maybe you have a connection in common, maybe they were introduced to you, or maybe you were referred by someone else. That's great. Great tips.
Yeah, it also just feels good too, right? Like reconnecting with folks you haven't talked to in a long time, like getting to let people know about your life updates, not just like, I have a new job here.
That's true. And having like a genuine conversation and understanding, each other on a real level and how they can help you too right now. That's something that I think sometimes we're uncomfortable asking our personal audiences, our personal networks, like, hey, I am job searching, or I am looking at this other career path. Is there anything that you know that we could talk about? If you have questions for them, that's great. But if you just introduce the topic to them, that can start a conversation. So it doesn't need to be the very traditional kind of informational interview with your friends. Just catching up can be really rewarding.
Completely agree. And you never know how you can also be helping them as well.
All right. Tell me, the last question I have for you is, how has your LinkedIn changed over time? We've talked already about how any small change you make to your LinkedIn profile is a good improvement. You can definitely improve things over time. But a lot of graduate students definitely feel like, I need to get this done. I need to have it done now. But things do change over time. So how has your LinkedIn profile changed over time?
Yeah. Some pretty recent updates would be that banner photo. I think I made that a couple of weeks ago. After kind of deciding like colors or kind of what I wanted to label. And also, again, like I can make a new one tomorrow and upload that, right? I also really worked on the about section because I really felt like it'd be important to tell my story in that way. I'm taking like a LinkedIn course right now, and definitely they're really great YouTube videos, for example, from Madeline Mann, the self-made millennial, or for example, just searching about different aspects of the LinkedIn profile. If you're like, oh, my about needs work, or I'm not sure what skills to include, you can definitely search those individually, which is really helpful. I think as well for my experience section, you probably noticed that I have multiple titles for each of my experiences. And that's because it's easier to reach folks with different types of language or even different keywords about things. So my role here at the Career Connection Center at University of Florida is manager for integrated partnerships. Most folks might not know what that means. I'm still figuring it out. But career coach is a lot more accessible, and it's a lot more searchable on LinkedIn for folks who want to hear from my expertise in that area.
Now, for grad students who are maybe graduate teaching assistants or graduate research assistants, what kind of other details do you suggest they include for that to help people understand what they're doing?
Yeah, so definitely including the title is important though, because there's still folks who are looking for graduate teaching assistants, right, or graduate researchers. I would say part of that could be the name of the lab, like the specific content area. I see so many folks, graduate teaching assistant, University of Florida. I have no idea what class you're teaching. I have no idea like what the scope of the research that you're doing is, some of those things. So you can definitely include that, like for a specific class, for including the names or keywords for content areas. For example, you can include the word lecturer, right? So things that are similar to or synonyms to the roles that you're in, for example. I've seen some graduate students include like project management, right? Because they're managing projects or leading teams of undergraduate and graduate students, for example. And so thinking about those transferable skills, or what are things called in the industry that you're interested in pivoting to? And the way you get to know that is by being part of newsletters for your industry, by looking at profiles of folks in that industry and connecting with folks to getting them on the phone or in Zoom and getting a better sense of what that language is. Job descriptions are also a great place as well.
Thank you so much for that, Sammie. We're going on almost an hour now, so we're going to wrap up soon. But I know there's some more things that you'd like to share before we wrap up. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, not only to connect with you, right? Because we haven't talked in a few months, so it's great to reconnect. That little couple of minutes before we got to be on this live chat. Definitely also thank you to everyone who has been here or who will watch this recording. I want to invite folks, you can definitely connect with me. You can practice those personalized invite skills by mentioning that you watch this, for example. And I'm actually doing some research with graduate students to get a better sense of what their struggle is with their job search. So I'd love to connect with y'all for informational interviews, right? Interviewing you for about 30 minutes or so to get a better sense of how I can potentially create a program that could provide a lot of support for graduate students specifically.
Thank you so much for that. So everyone, please connect with Sammie on LinkedIn. Message her if you are interested in participating in her research to help improve graduate student programming and just to really make sure that professional development and career search is there. Your interview can really help her do that. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Again, be sure to connect with Sammie on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn too. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Take